get signed in, first of all? Go ahead, Simon. All right, well, tonight we are glad to have Jaime Gonzalez with us. Jaime is the Community Conservation Director for Katy, Prairie Conservancy. Some of his jobs are that he helps assign and delivers educational programs for a diverse audience, such as some students, Master Naturalists, teachers, and landowners. He also helps with prairie restoration at Katy Prairie and elder schools. He collaborates with a lot of conservative movements and
conservation. Nothing against conservatives, but all right, super. All right, Amber, am I in the picture there? Yeah, you're right. Okay, the reason she's checking is we're on Facebook Live. So we invited Master Naturalists from across the state to see this tonight. For you guys who are joining us live, we are in Rosenberg, Texas, near Houston, and this is the Coastal Prairie Chapter monthly meeting. And so I work a lot with the Coastal Prairie Chapter and very excited to be here. Hope you guys online get something out of this. And for you guys who may want to share this, we'll have it not only on Facebook but on YouTube. We'll send you a link afterwards. So welcome, welcome. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about being media savvy. A lot of this information comes to me through experience, many errors. And so I am not a professor of communications, but I play one on TV. And I'm going to try to give you what we do at the Conservancy as a model for how you might do things cheaply and quickly and have more media impact. Let me just tell you just real quickly about my job. Debbie told you my position there, but really, just with many nonprofits, I wear many hats, just like most nonprofit folks. But I have a really unique job, and that is I am in charge of trying to get people connected with the prairie, either donors, volunteers, school children, business leaders, whoever. And I get to see the process from the beginning all the way through. And I have a part in all of that, which is kind of unique even for a small institution. So I get to help write the grants that at least put the language in to raise the funds. I get to then initiate the project. I get to manage the project. I get to work with volunteers. I get to work with the media to tell the story of that thing. And so I get to see all these different stages, and in each of those stages, there's a different kind of communication that needs to happen. And sometimes the communication within those different stages is very different. So we're going to go ahead and just give you kind of a quick and dirty overview of what we do at the Conservancy to kind of get our message out, but also to tell the story of what we're doing. And that's because there is an old phrase in marketing, and probably many of you guys have heard this, that if you do something and you don't tell anybody, what? You haven't done it. So you guys could be doing all kinds of amazing work with the Master Naturalists. If you tell no one, you didn't do it. That sounds like something that a millennial came up with, right? I got to take selfies and tell people about myself and all that stuff. But that's not really what it is, and I'm not really dissing the millennials. What I'm saying, I guess part of what I'm saying tonight is make your story known, because what it does is it sets you up for more volunteers, more money, more support in the community, better outcomes. You're not trying to be braggarts. What you're trying to do is engage the general public to help you do what you need to do, okay? And you can only do that if the general public knows about it. So we're going to teach you a few things. Now, recently I went on the board of the North American Association for Environmental Education as kind of the trade group for environmental education. It sets the standards, the benchmarks for environmental education. And so I'm real happy about that, because so much of environmental education is communications. It is trying to get people more aware, trying to get them involved, get them active, get them changing behavior, that kind of thing. And so very proud to be working for the Katy Prairie Conservancy, but I have other affiliations where communications are kind of a central thing. All right, let's get into this. Back in 2004, my wife and I got married, and when we did, we had the fortune of going to, we were very fortunate to go to southern Spain. Went to a cave. This cave's opening was teeny tiny. It was maybe that big, and it was a metal gate, and it was owned by a private family, and it didn't look like much of anything. We saw it in a guidebook, and we're like, hey, what is this? And we drove up there, and we're like, oh my God, this is the total waste of time. Got inside, and it was amazing. There was this huge gallery that opened up, and there was a little gift shop, which was kind of weird. But as we went into the cave, we started walking around, and we started seeing these cave paintings, which were 30,000 years old. This cave is way far away from the ocean, okay? So what they're doing is they're transmitting a story about an adventure that they took. And it struck me at that time that the power of story has been with us for as long as human beings have talked or could do art. And it is the way that we transmit information the most effectively. My advisor at University of Houston for my graduate degree, one day he was just kind of irritated. And he was teaching a science methods class, and I was helping him out. And he said, you know, Jaime, I'll tell you what. I know exactly the problem with education. And I said, wow, that's a pretty complicated thing. And are you sure you know? and I didn't really question him because he's very knowledgeable. He said, yeah, here's what it is. We've taken the most effective form of communication for human beings, stories. We've broken it up into 1,000 factoids. And then we regurgitate the facts to the kids. And then we think that they're going to put it back into a story. So we've literally taken the most effective means of communicating facts, figures, how to live, all these things out of the schools. And we've replaced it with disconnected facts. And I completely believe that. So one of the main keys tonight really is, if you're going to communicate with the general public, tell really damn good stories and make them memorable, okay? Facts on their own are not very good soldiers for you. Facts within the context of a story will really help you get that point across. We'll see some examples of that. So let me tell you about what we do at KPC. A lot of you guys know, but there are different contexts in which we have to tell stories. So as you guys know, and many of you guys have been up here and volunteered, and we thank you for that, those purple outlines are mostly the holdings of the Katy Prairie Conservancy. So we're a land trust here outside of Houston. We saved like 20,000 acres. We've saved about 20,000 acres with the assistance of a lot of folks, including private landowners. That's a big space, big enough to put all of Manhattan Island and 2 memorial parks on it. It's a big space. We want more, okay? But since 2010, we established what's called the Prairie Builder Schools and Parks program, where we're literally putting in pocket prairies all throughout the city. And this is an outdated map. We have about 12 more sites at this point. And sometimes they're smack dab in the middle of the city. Anybody see the MD Anderson Prairie? So some of you guys have, okay? So storytelling is really critical for us because what we're doing is we're doing something super weird. We're putting tall grasses back in the city where people are not used to seeing them. So we'll talk about how we do that. But just to say that as we tell stories, we're telling stories about the biology, we're telling stories about the history, we're telling stories about economics, we're telling stories about biodiversity and biodiversity conservation. And a lot of times when people think of a land trust, they think about this. This is what you're trying to save. Quote unquote pristine nature out in the middle of nowhere where no people are and all that. And we won't get into that whole construct of people not being a part of nature. They really are. But we're also telling that. The story of interconnectedness between people and nature. This is the MD Anderson Prairie, so this is in the middle of the Texas Medical Center. And we're also trying to tell stories about this. So as many of you guys have been hearing on the radio, there's lots of ideas for flood control. Well, when you're a giant green space on the map, people have all kinds of ideas about how they would like to use your land. So we've dealing with the bullet train issue right now. We've dealt with high transmission power lines. Many of you guys know that we dealt with a highway that they're trying to put through us. Well, this is the latest and greatest. So do you see where finish the job is? 1A right there? That's us. That is literally us. Now, this isn't fait accompli. There's lots of negotiation. There's money that the government needs to get together. We're not even close to anything like this. And we're being very proactive with folks who are decision makers, politicians, and other folks to try to come up with a solution that protects the wildlife and the cultural ways of the Katy Prairie. But we deal with a lot of issues, too. We're not just telling people about the birds and the butterflies. We're telling people about flood issues and climate change at times and other issues where people have disagreements. And that's where it gets kind of sticky. Okay, so you have to be kind of media savvy there. So the first piece of advice I would say is, and this is where people make the biggest mistake. Let me go ahead and state something up front. There is no such thing as a general audience. It doesn't exist. A general audience is everybody, but that's not an audience at all. An audience of everybody is not an audience of anybody. So one thing that I would suggest is pick an audience to focus on. You should be able to actually picture their face in your mind. Is it a millennial? Is it a young family with 2 kids? Is it a retiree? Who are you trying to reach with your messaging? You should be able to almost write a little mini biography about them. And I've done this in marketing classes. Also, what are you trying to get them to do? Are you just trying to give them information because you think it'll enrich their intellectual life? If that's the case, that's good, but know that that's what you're doing. Are you trying to entertain them? Are you trying to change their behavior, which is way, way harder than raising awareness or informing them? Are you trying to get them to donate, to support your work, or change their habits, which might not be a huge behavioral change, it might be just a one-off, right? So know what you want them to do before you start communicating to them. So if you're advertising for Prairie Heritage Festival, know the audience you need to reach, that you didn't see last year, that you want to see, and then try to figure out what you want them to do and be very clear about what you want them to do. Now here's some caveats here. One is human behavior is complex. What you're trying to do is manipulate the most complicated machine in the universe. Just figure that out for a second. There is no operating manual for that machine. We were not given an operating manual when we got that machine. We have to figure it out. It's complicated. I mean, literally, it's more complicated than Space Shuttle. So it is very complicated. So if you fail in your communication, guess what? You're not the first person. Keep going. The second thing is information by itself rarely, if ever, changes behavior. And what I mean by that is, in all my communications classes at Duke, at U of H, wherever, one thing holds true in the research. Raising awareness does not lead to behavioral change by itself. And that's how we operate a lot of times. If we just tell people about climate change, they're going to stop driving, or they're going to do this, or going to do that. If we just tell people about the plight of the monarchs, they're going to start planting milkweed. If we just tell them about this, that doesn't work. What does work is raise their awareness, give them information and ways to help, mentorship. It's a complicated relationship. There's also something we'll touch upon later on called social marketing, where you actually identify the behavior you want to happen, and then you go backwards and you figure out how you're going to get there on a trajectory using marketing techniques. Okay? So if you really want to do heavy-duty behavioral change, you're going to have to do something a little bit different. Okay? Trust communications and education experts. And actually, I just gave this talk at Rice University where I was talking to science majors in a science class. And scientists, more so than lay people, run into this problem a lot. They think because they know the most about the subject, that they themselves are the best communicators about that subject. And that's rarely true. And it's because they have what's called the curse of knowledge. They're so far in the bubble that they cannot stop using jargon. They don't use good techniques because guess what? They're not trained as communicators. So trust the people who do this for a living to be your allies in your work. Get your reps. I give some pretty good talks at this point. I'm not being like braggadocious, and here's why. The talks that I do really, really well, it's because I've given them 1 billion times. It's like a stump speech for a politician. If you give enough of the same talk over and over and over and over again, if you aren't really good at that after years of doing that, and I've been doing it for 20 years now, then you're doing something wrong. Because you learn, just like a stand-up comedian or anybody else who performs, you learn what works with the audience, what doesn't work with the audience, and everything in between. So what I'm saying is a lot of times when I get master naturalists or docents, volunteers, whatever, and they go out and they do a tour, they do a talk, they think it's a miserable failure, and it's, well, how many times did you do it? Well, just this one time. Have you done it before? No, I've never done it before. We've never asked Joe DiMaggio to be a 400 hitter batting once in his lifetime. It doesn't work like that ever. Also, when you take kids on tours, and I've run into this for about 20 years, you lead a kid on a tour, and I've actually had volunteers come back and say, I don't think I reached that child at all. I don't think that they care about nature. You let them on one 45-minute tour. It takes a lot more than that. Repetition. Don't be hard on yourselves. Last part is think and then act. A lot of times we're so action-oriented, and I'm a very action-oriented person. I just jump in there and start making a mess sometimes. What I mean by this is, if you want to communicate well, the worst thing to do is just start getting busy and writing things down and shooting it out all over the place without thinking about what you want it to do in the first place. It's like trying to make an airplane before you know where you want to go. It just doesn't make any sense, and you're likely to crash. Okay? So think about where you're headed, and if you're trying to do too much with one thing, that's another thing that people run into is they try to do everything with one thing, and you can't be focused, right? Be focused both on your audience and your message. All right. Why do you need a good story? Why? Well, first of all, the media is so jam-packed full of stories at this point that it's very, very, very difficult to break through the static. It's really hard. The media is diffuse. You can't get on channel 13 or channel 2 or channel 11 and think, I got 1/3 of the audience now. That's not how that works, right? So you're going to need a really good story to punch through, and we'll talk about what makes up a good story. You also need a good a story to connect on an emotional level with your audience. Here's the thing. How many of you guys would say you're pretty intellectual and not emotional? Raise your hands. Be brave. Okay? So for you guys online, it's probably like, 30%. Here's the thing. How many of you guys watch Star Trek? Aha. So you had the two kinds of people there, right? You had Spock, the intellectual, and you had Captain Kirk, the lascivious, emotional guy. Okay? Here's the thing about human psychology that's pretty certain at this point. The emotional side controls about 80% of our decision making. The intellectual side serves about 20% of our decision making. I know when intellectual people hear that, they get so upset. They want it to be the other way around because it's just not logical. It doesn't make any sense. Don't fight biology. Don't fight biology. Don't think you're going to outthink people and not apply to their emotional side and win. So if you want to be connected both to their intellect, I'm not saying don't be intellectual. I'm saying you're going to have to find a way for intellectualized things to become emotional, because otherwise you're likely to not reach very many people. Okay? Touch them on an emotional level. The last thing is it's going to make your work a lot more meaningful and enjoyable. If you come up with really great stories, you grow as a person. And you tell the story better. And people engage with you better. And when people engage with you, guess what? You get energy from the audience or from a newspaper clipping, and it makes you a better communicator. Okay? So one thing I'm not going to play for you because I don't have time tonight is a really great TED Talk. And I'll send you a little biography and links to videos that might be helpful after this talk tomorrow. There's a great TED Talk by an author named Simon Sinek. And he's sold a whole bunch of books based on this very simple idea. The very simple idea is that what we oftentimes do when we transmit information to people is we start at the wrong emotional or the wrong level. We usually start with the what, which is very kind of intellectualized. What do we do? So, for instance, when I started at the Katy Prairie Conservancy, I would start a presentation about KPC, something like this. What we do is we save land, and we do it in one of two ways, and all of that stuff. It took me years, and it really didn't crystallize until I saw this talk, that I'd been doing it wrong the entire time. Why? Because when I did it, I would say, we save this much land, and I'd show pictures of maps, and it had geometric shapes on it. And I thought, people are going to care about these geometric shapes and these statistics that I'm giving them. No, they didn't. They didn't. Why? Because I had not started with the most important thing. Why are we doing what we do? That's the emotional part. For some people, it's the spiritual part. For some people, it's the ethical part. So now I start off with 4 value statements. We believe that wildlife should persist and be abundant. We believe that people should connect to their Texan identity. We believe that flood control leads to better lives for people downstream. We believe, and we go down that list, and that immediately does one thing. It gets you into your audience's value wheelhouse. So I can turn around and say, do you believe what I believe? And you can immediately tell whether you got people or not. But it also makes them your ally. And immediately, I'm not some weird person coming off the street trying to sell you something. I am somebody that thinks like you do. I'm somebody that connects with the way that you do. Okay? So if you have a chance, it's like 5 minutes, but it's fascinating. Fascinating. Start with the why. When you're really trying to convince somebody, don't ever bury the lead. Don't bury the lead. The why is the lead, oftentimes. And what do I mean by that? How many of you guys read the sports section? Sports section, very few of you. But let me tell you about the sports section for all you non-sports section readers. It is not the best writing in the world, okay? Unless you're reading like Sports Illustrated or something like that. But they do this better than any other part of the newspaper. James Harden the other day on the Rockets scored 60 points, had 11 assists and 10 rebounds, triple doubles, awesome, historic. They could have said, the whistle blew at 7 p.m. The next 4 plays were this, that, and the other. And then da-da-da-da, and at the end it said, and finally, James Harden ended up with 60 points. That's not what they do at all. Because they recognize that people are limited on time and they'll never get to that bottom usually. So what do they say? James Harden had a historic night, scored 60 points, blah, 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 blah. And then they tell you about the game. So that's the why. That's the why you should care right there. Okay? Don't bury the lead. Oftentimes, when I see new communicators working, they want to explain everything to you and then get to your point. Don't do that. Get to your point and then explain. Okay? One thing you can do to make good stories, we're going to talk about good stories real quick, and then we're going to talk about specific media that you can use. One thing you can do is simplify your story. Sometimes we want to take a very complicated scientific story or other story, economic or whatever, and we want to keep it as complicated as it is and then try to get it out to members of the general public, whatever audience that is. This often fails because people don't have time or they might not be technically proficient enough to understand what you're saying. So here's a good example of what I mean by that. For many, many decades, the native plant community, not just here in Houston, but all across the country, has been trying to get people to plant native plants with almost 0% luck. Drive around your neighborhood. Let's be harsh about it, because I have failed more than anybody. Let's be harsh about it. You drive around your neighborhood, do you ever see native plants? When you see one, what do? You can't believe it. You freak out. You're like, whoa, that's a swamp sunflower or whatever. I do that. That's how unsuccessful we've been. And it's not because anybody's bad or dumb or doesn't know how to talk to people or anything like that. It's partially because we've been telling too complicated a story. When people come to us, and I've done this many times, they say, what are those native plants? A lot of times what we do is we take a gigantic checklist of plants, about 90% of which are not commercially available, by the way, and we say, here's the checklist, and here's 5 books. Why don't you go become an expert on native plants and then go and plant some plants? We don't do that for anything else. Think about recycling. Do we ask people, do we give people a chemistry manual? No. What do we do? Exactly. You just tell them the numbers. Put these in the bin. Bingo, bango. You've done something great. You've helped with the planet, right? So what we did is we had a design contest a while ago, and we're actually raising funds for a pilot garden. We said, when we try to get people to transform their whole yard into natives or grow 1 million species of natives, we're just taking it too far. It's too complicated. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to get them to grow 9 natives. That's it. Because we know, A, this is a gateway drug. We all know that, okay? The primary hurdle is getting them to try it in the first place, and they're so overwhelmed they don't even try it. So these 9 species were selected because together they bloom well together throughout the year. They attract different kinds of pollinators and birds. Some of them have cultural affiliations like Texas bluebonnet. They have structure. That's why we have the grasses in there. And it's easy for people to get their head around. It's easy for people to understand. If you plant these natives, guess what? The biologists and ecologists in this area said, you're doing your thing. When we tell people even to plant native plants without putting any borders or boundaries on it, they don't know where to start or what to do or which species work well together. So what this is does anybody ever get those meals in the mail that are kind of all pre-cut up and all that stuff and fix them? Admit to it. Come on, there's a few. Yeah, I've done it too, right? I love those. I don't do it anymore because it's kind of wasteful. But I'm not disparaging you, by the way. I loved it because I'm not a cook. Everything came out of the box. It was all color-coded. It told me exactly what to do real quickly, and bingo, bango, I had a meal. And it was usually tasty. I'm not going to lie. HelloFresh. That's not a plug. We need to get that simple for beginners when we're asking them to do certain things at home. People are not dumb. They don't have time. They don't have time. Think about the lack of time that you have. So this 9 Natives program is really an attempt to simplify for us to do some of the thinking as naturalists, to then give them something and say, look, if you do this, you are doing your part. Okay? So simplify your story. Be surprising with your stories. Don't give away the fun. Don't destroy the magic. Here's what I mean. So this is my son. He's in my front yard near the Astrodome. We plant our front yard in all wildflowers every year. All kids from all over the place come take pictures. And, I'm trying to connect him with his Texan heritage and all that stuff. But this morning he walks in and he says, Daddy, I'm hungry. He's finally gotten to the point where he leaves his bed and comes over and he snuggles in us and he talks and he makes jokes and, he wakes us up about 5:30 in the morning. He's a joy. I love him very much. But this morning he was jumping up and down and, I need food. I'm hungry. And I thought for a second, what do we got in the fridge? And so I finally just said, okay, let's go eat some grass seeds. And he said, what? That's gross, Daddy. And I said, let's go eat some grass seeds. I think they're delicious. He said, what are you talking about? I'm not going to eat grass seeds. I said, I bet you will if I put syrup on them. And he said, what? And so we went over there and we explained the process of making flour from grass seeds makes pancakes. Okay? The thing about people is they love surprises, even tiny surprises. So if you can load the title of your program, the introduction to your program with something mysterious, and there's another word for it, discrepant, it does not fit with their conception of something, that's a hook, is what that is. So I could have said, yeah, son, let's go eat some pancakes. It wasn't nearly as fun, okay? Wasn't nearly as fun. So here's a sign that I once made. Now, I didn't get permission to put it up. I'm just going to be honest with you. But because people said, well, what if people misunderstand? What if they think they're building houses? I said, did that just get your attention? Okay. Does it help you think about it in a different way? Yeah. So we didn't do this when we did a really boring sign. I think you guys have seen it. It's like Indian grass restoration, 53 acres. It looks very formal, but it's not very fun. Okay. So get people's attention, because novelty and surprise is a way of cutting through that media static. Okay? You know, if you found out that, I don't know, that Elvis was an ice skater, that's very discrepant, okay? And you're like, I gotta know more about that, right? So I don't think he was an ice skater, but it's a funny vision in my head right now. I got like Blue Hawaii on ice skates. Anyway, here's a few things that you can do. So you need a good story, make it surprising, simplify it, know your audience. But here are a few things that you can do relatively cheaply to get your message across. Number one is video. Last year I put together a short film festival featuring conservation and ecology topics from around the region. It's called Wild About Houston. I had a really, really hard time finding enough video content to fill out the roster of that film festival, because a lot of conservation groups, frankly, don't make very much video. And I say, why not? Do you know how many hours the average American watches TV a day? 5. You're dead right. 5. What is TV? It's video. Most Americans now get all of their information from video. They're not reading. The average American reads less than 1 book a year. And I'm not casting aspersions about Americans. I love America, right? But if you really want to break through, put it in a medium that they'll actually use. And you don't have to spend a jajillion dollars on video. You can, certainly. If I go to a movie company right now and I say, you know what, I want a 8-minute video about the Katy Prairie Conservancy, they'll say, fine, $40,000. I don't have $40,000. Are you kidding? I don't even have $1,000. You know? So what I've had to do is get kind of smart about it. So here's a few things that I've learned. You don't need complicated equipment. So there's my iPhone right there. Okay? iPhones now take 4K video. Okay? Or smartphones, if you've got an Android or whatever. But there are a couple of things that you might want to use along with your video. Number one is please, and I've seen this with a lot of Master Naturalist videos, please use a tripod. Please. Doesn't have to be an expensive tripod. But this looks like either an earthquake is happening or you've had too much coffee. And it's very distracting, and I just turn away from those immediately. I can't handle this. Number two, audio is king. So I had a chance to go and do a movie camp at Duke this last summer. It was great. We learned how to put together short documentary videos. And this got pressed to us over and over and over again. People will put up with semi-hazy video if it's got great audio, but they will not put up with great video that has really terrible audio. This is why I'm wearing this wireless mic tonight. This wireless mic was $100. It's not going to break the bank, but it makes the audio on my Facebook Live way more clear. So I do stuff for my church. I Facebook Live the sermons, and before I was doing it without a mic, and it was terrible audio quality. The number of likes on Facebook were like, because people started watching it, and they're like, oh, this is terrible. Ever since we did that, it's like quadrupled, because people love good audio. They love good audio, so do that. Keep it short, people. Keep it short. There are Master Naturalists in this area and in the state who make good videos, but sometimes they're just a little too long. People have been shown to like videos 3 minutes and less. A minute, and I'm serious, and you're saying, what can I say in a minute? Think about a movie trailer. You could say a lot in a minute. You don't have to stretch your movie out to 8 or 9 or 10 because, frankly, a lot of those never get seen all the way through. Just be honest with you, okay? And music can help or it can hurt. If you're going to put music in videos, make sure it's not distracting, either because it's too loud or because it sounds silly. People like to put in cutesy little songs and things. For a lot of people, it's like, nah, I don't want to hear that. I'm going to turn the channel. So you can make super... I mean, if you have this whole setup, a little light stand and all this for a chapter, it's probably going to run you less than $300 for a chapter. And you can do all kinds of things. What we use this for, this setup right here, is we do a program called Virtually Wild Texas with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So once a month, we go out into the field somewhere in Houston. Could be a National Wildlife Refuge, the Katy, Prairie, Buffalo Bayou Park, and we broadcast live to sometimes over 900 school kids across the state. That's our video equipment. This is my mic. They can hear me. It's not that complicated because the technology has really come into line. All right. I'm going to show you a silly video. Now, you're not going to be able to hear this, and some of you have already seen it. So if you've seen it, just try to block it out of your memory the first time you saw it. But it proves a point. Nope.
We need the real Stephen Colbert and Colbert Nation to save the Colbert Bump, the magnificent deer park.
Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Let me tell you how complicated this video was to make. I got a call at 3 p.m. from Lan Shen, who many of you guys know. And she says, you need to go home and get your suit. We're going to shoot a video. And I said, what are you talking about? This is at the height of trying to save the Deer Park Prairie. We had a month to raise $4 million. She said, wouldn't it be cool if we got Stephen Colbert involved in this whole thing? And I said, that would be cool. He had his show on Comedy Central. And the Colbert bump was when somebody went on his show and they got a bump in their ratings and things like that. So we devised a plan in 2 hours to go here and name one of the pimple mounds the Colbert bump. And to throw it up online and to see, it was like chumming for sharks. What's going to happen? Okay. What ended up happening with this dumb video, and I made this video and I starred in it, so I can call it dumb, is that it reverberated across the world. It literally ended up with news articles saying, will Stephen Colbert save the Deer Park Prairie? In several countries. And all across the U.S. It just got picked up by the wire, and it got passed everywhere. By the end of this campaign, we had not only saved the Deer Park Prairie, but we got donations from 5 foreign countries and 22 states. Yeah, wow. Right. And here's the thing about video. We know that 96% of the people who donated never visited. And we asked them, how did you connect with it? They said, that dumb video, but more, the good videos that we shot that told the story of the Deer Park Prairie. Stories matter. Video matters. Okay? There we are, and that's Jennifer Lorenz, who used to be the executive director, and she's having a press conference on the prairie, which is the most ridiculous thing. I actually got a scar right here from scratching myself at the podium. But long story short, conservation victory made possible in part through a lot of hard work by Jennifer and others behind the scenes, and generosity from Terry Hershey for sure, but also by video content and newspaper stories. In fact, one of the things that we did, one thing I always say is, if you can get on TV, that is worth way more than doing any tabling events. If I do a tabling event, I'm going to be honest with you. You know, you sit there and you have all your leaflets and things like that. Now, I'm not talking about Prairie Heritage Festival. That's got a special significance because we're actually trying to get the general public to care about prairies. I'm talking about the mom and pop ones where you sit there and you're just really kind of just sitting there and nobody visits your table. I could do that 52 weekends a year. And I'd see, if I saw 1,000 people, I'd be lucky. If we get on TV, Great Day Houston, Channel 2, which we were on a while back, we're hitting 50, 80,000 people in a go. Okay? So video is really, really important. After we did news stories live from the Deer Park Prairie, we saw this huge spike in our donation. When we got in the Chronicle, we had a lot of people get interested, but the donation wasn't as much. People saw it on TV. What did they do? They went right on the computer and donated. Right? One time I was walking around with Annie Sirota, and we were doing that story, and we were walking around, and 2 things were happening. First of all, I was literally plucking ticks off his leg without telling him, because there were so many ticks, and I didn't want him to know that there were that many ticks out there, because I thought it'd show on his face. That is no joke. I was literally walking behind him. The second thing that was happening was I was shooting out, and you should definitely do this. If you're talking to a reporter, they have a great ear for what their audience wants to hear, way better than you do. So I was throwing out all kinds of wording and content and ideas and things like that, just trying to see what would stick with him. And I finally got to this point where we're walking along, and I said, you know, Andy, I said, the cool thing about this place is how ancient it is. He said, what do you mean? I said, this thing could have been here for thousands of years. And it's one of the most endangered ecosystems on planet Earth. I said, that's really interesting to me. And he said, wow, I never thought about it that way. Can I start the news broadcast live that way? Turned around and he said, I'm standing at one of the most endangered ecosystems on planet Earth, and it's ancient. Boom, the donations. Okay? Listen to what the reporters are feeding back to you, because they have a really great ear for stories. Social media, oh my God, people are going to roll over in their graves. Who absolutely will not participate in social media? If you won't, that's cool. I understand. That's okay. The world is not yours. No, I'm just kidding. The future is not yours. No, I'm just kidding. I have to be very careful about social media because it's very addictive. But the thing that sometimes when they get involved in social media do is they go overboard. They're like, we're going to do all these different platforms and go nuts and reach everybody. Don't do that. There are lots of good platforms, and this is not a promotion. I don't get a check from any of these people. But for the Conservancy, we use Facebook, Instagram, which is heavily picture, very little Twitter, although Twitter can be useful under certain circumstances, and something called Canva. Canva is not a social media network. What it is it is an absolutely fabulous, and it costs like $12 a month, service that helps you design social media cards and other media to look beautiful. They have lots of templates. You can just take out the old words, put in the new words. All these graphic designers have done all the work for you, for the most part. And it makes cards look juicy, like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. Because one of the things you have to do is you have to make things look gorgeous. Because if you make them look boring, they are boring. If they look boring, they are boring. Okay? So make them look great. Canva can help you do that. The reason we use Facebook is because it's gigantic. It's pretty easy to do. Now, they just changed their algorithm for what shows up on your feed, right? So what really is going to show up on your feed is less about your chapter and more about posts that engage response. So the posts that where a lot of people are talking about something or responding are the things that are going to show up in your feed. So that's going to have to change some of the things that we do. Okay? Now, sometimes people think, if I have a website, that's great, and I don't need Facebook and all this stuff. I asked our social media person, who I work with, to pull up some numbers for me in terms of the analytics. Behind the scenes, who's doing what online. And I look at these analytics to analyze what we're doing too. The main point here is that we get more traffic on Facebook than our website. We get most of our traffic on our website because they've come from Facebook to register for a class or do something. So Facebook, for a chapter like yours, can be very important, or any Master Naturalist chapter, because it gets a lot of engagement, even from people you would never guess from around the world. Okay? So I would suggest if you just have to do a couple things, website, Facebook, and make sure that that Facebook has good content, that's going to get you where you need to go. Photographs. Don't put a lot of text. Put a thing that says read more, please. That much text is about all that people are going to read. These scrolling things where you have to do that, forget that. Nobody has the time for that. That, and then a link to read more. Link them out. Put a gorgeous picture there. If you can put a picture that makes people think or go, what? Even better. Talked about that discrepant phenomenon. Here's one thing that people forget a lot now. They go so overboard with the social media, they're like, oh, this is snail mail. Nobody reads this. Show of hands, how many of you guys read a circular in your neighborhood? Look at that. So you guys can't see this out in the ether, but almost everybody in this room opens up a circular. I open up circulars. Here's the cool thing about circulars. they have a huge readership. They're oftentimes looking for content because they need content to fill the paper. And if you advertise with them, it's way cheaper than advertising with a big publication or magazine. Okay? And guess what? It's already keyed to go to your proximate audience. The circulation pattern is your neighborhood. You don't have to shoot it out to the world and have it miss most of the targets because it's in your geography. And I talked to a marketing person a while back, and she said this is the number one mistake that conservation groups do, is they forget old media because they think it's passé, but it's not. Here's something that I hope that you guys do, and across the state. Okay. Cultivate media relationships. Here's what I mean by that. If you're in a hurry to do something, it is your problem, right? It's not somebody else's problem. That's your problem. And if you call up a reporter panicked, guess what? They have 10 million other things to do. It's not their problem. It's your problem. So what you're going to have to do is, if you really want to be effective at engaging the media and getting them to care about what you care about, is you're going to have to start that relationship way before you need it. It's just like any other relationship in your life. You don't go to strangers on the street and ask them for something huge. Think about it. When you if you get an article in the Chronicle, how many thousands of dollars is that worth? If you had to pay for that advertising space, that reporter is doing you a horrendous favor. That's thousands and thousands of dollars. And you're asking a stranger to do that. That doesn't happen. A lot of times that doesn't work. So what I would say is start cultivating relationships, especially with local newspapers. Make sure that you know the reporters, who's covering the environment in this case, or conservation, or growth issues, or whatever issues. Go out to lunch with them. Talk to them. See what they're interested in. Okay? And when you do that, try to have a genuine two-way relationship. A lot of times what we do is we really want to use the media, right? But the media has a really strong and important role, and they have, obviously, their own readership to worry about. So if you're just constantly just telling them, you need to print this, without listening to what their needs are, then that's not really a relationship. You're trying to get them to do something for you. So for instance, there's a wonderful Chronicle curator at this point. She's an editor, Lisa Gray. We have a really good working relationship. And the reason for that is that I check in with Lisa to find out if she needs any stories, but I also ask her about what she's working on and things like that. I'm genuinely interested because she's kind of fascinating. And so what we've developed over all these years is a relationship where she can call me up and say, listen, I need something for Gray Matters. Can you write an editorial, or can you write a piece? What are you thinking about? What would you write about? And I'll say, yeah, maybe. Or sometimes I'll say, no, I'm kind of busy, but I'll tell you what, I'll direct you to somebody who's more appropriate or who has time or whatever. And then when I ask her to publish something, sometimes she can do it and sometimes she can't. But she's more likely and receptive to the idea because we have this long-standing relationship. She is, and don't talk to them, a lot of times what will happen is people will get something published and then they won't talk to that person until they need them again. Well, think about how that's like in your life. If you're like that, if you're known as the person who only talks to people when you need something, what kind of person are you? A user. Don't be a user, okay? Be somebody that is a partner in storytelling, okay? So keep in touch. She was so instrumental in helping to save the Deer Park Prairie because a whole stream of stories that she and her colleagues did, including an editorial from the Chronicle that said, save the Deer Park Prairie, literally, that we actually awarded her an award here in 2014. Jim was there and some other people were here when we did the Prairie Restoration Roundup. We gave her an award as a Prairie Champion because she had been reporting for years on the prairie. She's the one who got it into the Chronicle. She's the one who got it into the ether. If you're seeing prairie this and prairie that in the news, a lot of it's because of her. She is a Prairie Champion. Now, she will be the first person to tell you that that's not her job. What she's looking for are good stories. It just happens that the prairie story is a good one, and that's why she works with us. Okay? Getting close. One of the last things is provide on-ramps to action. I forget this all the time. I go and tell people about an issue or something that's happening that we'd like corrected, but I don't give them clear, concise information about how they can get involved or literature or whatever, right? And the first time I taught, so I've been teaching the Master Naturalist program since 2001. Okay, I've been here for 17 years, dear Lord. Feeling older, you can see this white skunk stripe coming up. Anyway, long story short, the first time I taught it, I had a mentor, and I watched this person teach it. Told me about how horrible the coastal prairie's plight was. It was all going away. It was all dying. It was terrible. There was nothing we could do about it. Good night. Good night? I was like, what? You just told me there was a huge problem. What are you telling me good night for? So when I started teaching about the prairie, I always tried to end up with, you heard what's happening, here's how you can get engaged. This is how you can get involved. Don't forget that part, because otherwise you're just a depressing story that somebody had that day. Okay? You're not going to change anything at that point. When you do that, be clear and concise, and then mentorship is really critical with all of these things. And it's true of the Master Naturalist program writ large. Once you get good at something, train somebody else. Don't keep it all bottled up like a genie. Share it with somebody, because you don't know how long you'll be around the chapter, and somebody will benefit from that training. So here's one good bit of mentorship. In May, we believe, the CEC Houston, which is the Citizens Environmental Coalition, is going to run a workshop on how to create short, effective videos on the cheap. And hopefully what will happen is some folks from the Master Naturalist chapter will come to that, get trained up, shoot some really cool short little videos, and then submit them for the film festival in August. I'd love to see a lot of Master Naturalist products submitted for consideration. That'd be great. You guys have tons of stories. I know you guys. You're working on all kinds of cool stuff. Very compelling stories. So please get that going. And here's my last point. If you're going to make something, and this is my principle, someday I'll write a book on this and make about $5. It's the gum principle. If you want to make something really stick, have 3 elements to it. First of all, make it gorgeous. What is that? That's the sugar around the pill. If you see something that looks really boring, like I said, it's boring. If you see something that's really kind of compelling, and I'm not saying this is the most compelling thing of all, but I am writing a book, and I've been writing it for, it seems like, decades now. But one thing I am doing in my mind and on the computer is I'm actually graphically designing it. I could leave that to the publisher, which is a very skilled publisher to do, but I want them to see my vision aesthetically of what it should look like. It's my product. It's my baby. I want them to take a look at it, because what something looks like really determines, in some ways, whether somebody will pick it up in the first place. Okay, so make it gorgeous. Make it useful. Can somebody do something practical with it? So I could have written a book that just talked about the coastal prairie, and then you put it down, and there's nothing there. But inside that book, there are going to be lessons of things that you can do. Make a seed ball. Plant a pocket prairie. Do this. Do that. So that at least you can have an idea of how you can get involved and help. And then lastly, make it meaningful, right? The why. And if you put those 3 things together, whether you're making a video, whether you're making a book, whether you're putting a flyer in, whether you're advertising an event, whatever, I can guarantee you that people will respond to that. So with every product that I make, sometimes I get blowback, like, Jaime, you're spending so much time making it look pretty, just get the information out. Well, I could get the information out super quick. I could put it on a piece of white paper and put black text on it and just send it out. Guess what? And put a boring title on it. Everybody can do that, right? That doesn't get you any hits at all. So we try to come up with intriguing names, good graphics. We engage with a lot of photographers to get us really great photography. And we try to make it so that when you look at something or you watch something, you go, man, I want more. Where's the sequel to that? Okay. All right, this is my last slide. If you want to learn more about, and I'll send you links to each one of these because they're online. That one's not online, you have to buy that one. But if you want to dive into this a little bit deeper, here are some resources for you. So several years ago, Audubon and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and NAAAE and other groups put together that Influencing Conservation Action. And basically, it's maybe like 36 pages, but it goes through and it says what works to engage people in conservation. It's really nice. It's like if you want to do this, you got to do this. If you want to do this, you got to do this. How do you turn that lever? Okay. Across the spectrum is like resources for environmental education. So if you want kind of a broad overview of what environmental education can and cannot do and how it's done, that's a good resource. And then I don't have time to go into this, but if you really want to change behaviors of people, this is a really good book by Doug McKenzie Moore. He's a social marketing expert. And what that means is, for instance, with native plants, I'm hoping later this year to start conduct a marketing survey. And it goes something like this. You go into a neighborhood, you pick a specific demographic of specific people, and you ask them, what are the barriers to you planting native plants? Why would you want to do it, if you want to do it at all? And you ask them a series of questions, and you basically do market research. And that is oftentimes the biggest problem for conservation groups. We don't know enough about our product and how it's perceived in order to sell it properly. I constantly tell people that if we knew as little about how to market the prairie as if Coke knew as little about their people who buy Cokes that we know about the prairie and how to sell it, they would have been out of business about 100 years ago. And I'm dead serious about that. We constantly tell ourselves, like, people don't like to plant prairie because this or that. We don't know. We haven't literally asked them. We've never researched it. Like I said, these are some good resources for you. And then we got questions. And I know I did a quick run through. Yes?
This is both a question and a comment.
Uh-oh.
When you speak of environmental education, prairies, anything environmental, your name, Jaime Gonzalez, is the #1 name everybody drops. We work at the museum, and some teacher came up to me when I was talking about the prairie, and they said, "Oh, we saw Jaime Gonzalez." You are the guy here in Houston, and you've been here for a while. How did you do it? And can somebody here do that?
So first of all, I'll give you your $20 check later on, Sandra. So that's a comment. That's a question. What's your comment?
The comment was, you are the name.
Oh, okay.
That is associated.
So the for you guys online, it was that I have a lot of visibility in terms of environmental education in town, and I enjoy that. Through trial and error, I'll tell you this. I got my first job at the Houston Arboretum in 2008. I was as green comes, and I got that, and I'll tell you exactly why I got that job. I had been working at a biotech company and absolutely not liking it. It was very miserable. And I worked the graveyard shift, 12 at night to 8 o'clock in the morning. Threw my circadian rhythms off. It was awful. Anyway, I needed an outlet, so I started volunteering at the Arboretum and doing little projects and getting to know the staff and all that stuff. So when a position for a bilingual naturalist came up, the first bilingual naturalist they had, my name got thrown into the hat. But I had never taught anything other than part of an ecology lab in college because the graduate student literally left. And my professor pressed me into service. Okay? So I thought, oh, I have to teach kids? Oh, that's terrible. But the other 4 days of the year, 4 days of the week, I get to play in the woods. Awesome. Well, over 7 years, I learned to not only love teaching, but really love kids and adults and learners and all that stuff. But it was all through trial and error. So I went back to school and actually had a fellowship to go to A&M to study, full ride to study wildlife science with the Regent professor at the wildlife department. One weekend, I decided I had made a mistake. That what I really wanted to do was I wanted to learn the theory and the application of education. So I dropped out, let go of my full ride, this fabulous professor, and went and paid for my education at U of H. And then student taught. And since then, I've taught, in my 20 years, I have probably taught over 100,000 kids, probably something like that. So what I'm saying is, it's just repetition. It doesn't take brain surgery. It just takes repetition, repetition, repetition. It's just like gymnastics or whatever. Dancing, it's the same thing.
But you've penetrated all these markets, as you would say.
I've tried to. But behind all the success, there's a lot of failure. I've failed a lot. I'll just be honest with you. Any other questions? Yes?
What are the top two challenges to what you do with the Prairie Conservancy, and what are the top two solutions to those problems?
Okay, what are the top two problems? The top two problems are we're a green blank space on the map, and people are constantly have all kinds of schemes as to what they want to do with our land. That is absolutely the truth. And my boss, Mary Ann, I'll show her this part of the recording, has been brilliant about fending those things off. No, she has. She has been brilliant about that. I don't know what's going to happen with the reservoir. There's so much money and politics behind it. So that's one of the biggest challenges. Here's the other big challenge. A prairie. Nobody knows what that is anymore. And when they know about it, they have lots of misconceptions about it. And it is, and I will say this with great emotional love for the prairie, in the minds of the general public, unless you switch them, the prairie is the least sexy ecosystem on planet Earth. Some people even think swamps are better. And I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. We're not mountains. We're not clear streams. We're none of that. We're not deserts. None of that. So when I first got this job, my solution was, I'm just going to tell people how many butterflies and toads, and I'm going to use my ecological mind, and I'm going to just convince them by the number of species there are. And what I found was there is a ceiling to the number of people who care. And that ceiling is actually much lower than you'd think. Okay? So, and that's unfortunate, but what it did is it really opened my eyes up that I needed to try a different tact. So I said, okay, we got the least sexy ecosystem, so I'm going to have to counterbalance that in some other way. This is the answer. This is the answer. My ecosystem that I champion, the prairie, has something that no other ecosystem in Texas has. This is the progenitor of Texan identity. If you think about Texas and Texas icons, Texas is a beautiful multicultural state now. Lots of things going on, great cities and all that stuff. But if you really think about Texas and Texans, that's where it came from. That's it. That's the wellspring of Texan identity. I'm not just talking about the fact that it gave us barbecue and country music and the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, which is the biggest social event in town, is a prairie event. Think about that. It also gave us independent-mindedness, toughness. You know, if you want to understand Texas politics, go back to the frontier and see the people who had to survive that. It teaches us about where we live. And so oftentimes what has failed is I go into a community and somebody expresses an interest in making a pocket prairie. We have an award-winning project in town. I'm not going to say the name, but we have an award-winning project in town. And it's in the middle of urbanization. I mean, just hardcore. And we were trying to explain to the folks that were kind of interested. They weren't really interested in this. They had been told they're going to put a pocket prairie here. So I'm sitting in this construction trailer with all these guys, and they were all guys, and they all wore hard hats, and they were all trying to be impressive to one another. And they said, "What the hell is this prairie thing?" And so, you know, because we'd been talking about these flowers and these, you know, and they're like, these are all serious project managers. Like, what? I don't get it. I have to say, I don't get this prairie stuff. What the hell does this have to do with anything? So I said, okay, the birds and the butterflies are not going to hack it. So we started talking to them about what they did on their weekends. A lot of these guys went hunting. They went to their ranch. They did this. They did that. We got to this. And I said, look, here's what we're trying to do, guys. We're not trying to bring you something new and weird. We're trying to bring you something ancient and meaningful. And once we made this a Texan identity thing, the prairie thing, there were no more problems at all. You know why? Because nobody wants to be the jerk that says, I want to rip the bluebonnets down and I want to mow down the symbol of Texas. Yeah, nobody wants that. So I joke about this a lot, but when we name a new pocket prairie, any project that we take on, before we sign off on helping somebody, they have to apply a name to it. It has to have an identity. They have to put signage, because an unsigned prairie is a dead prairie. We, most of the time, incorporate bluebonnets, even though technically they're not native to Harris County, that species. It depends on which thing you... But what it does, it gives it a layer of protection. And then we say, when you name it after something that is that nobody wants to violate if they rip it down. Name it after somebody who's beloved. Name it after somebody you're memorializing. Name it, put the word Texas in it. And I'm dead serious about that. That has worked on several occasions. And then have kids grow plants and have a big show that kids are putting plants in that habitat. Who wants to be the ogre that comes in and rips out these poor kids' plants? Because I know that whenever I plant a prairie, I have to protect it until people get used to it. Okay? So the biggest challenges are we're a blank space on the map, and prairie is misspelled by everybody, and it's not understood by many people. In fact, all three of our names, Katy is misspelled, prairie is misspelled, and we're usually called the Conservatory. So I have argued for a name change because it's too mutilated by the general public. Yes?
For the gear that you use, can you lay out the brand or what you actually...
Sure. I'll send you an equipment list. It's not that the only way that you could do it, but I'll have hyperlinks to Amazon or whatever, and say if you try these things, they'll probably work for you.
Where will you put that? Like...
I'm going to actually send you guys an email. Okay. It's going to have publications, gear, and other things that I think might be helpful for you. Okay. Yes?
Texas Highways is looking for movies.
They are? Are they looking for them on the highway? No, I'm just kidding. Are they getting submissions for videos?
Send in a movie. And,
fun. All right, great. Awesome. That's good to know. Do you know when it closes? Okay.
You have all the information on it.
They're looking for blank spaces.
For blank spaces. All right. They can look inside my head. You had a question back there. Yeah, I'm going to send you guys all a link, and hopefully the chapter reps will send it out to everybody, because I know it's hard to write and all this stuff, and I'll explain. I'll put little notes on the books and what it will get you, basically. There's also another book that's a really fabulous read. It's pretty short, called The Storytelling Animal. It's all about stories and how people connect to stories and how we're addicted to stories and all that stuff. It's very good. All right.
When is the CEC workshop?
They haven't set a date yet, but they think it's going to be in May, and I'm going to send it out to all the Master Naturalist chapters because I think that they would all benefit from that. And I'll hopefully be at that as well, teaching a couple things. All right, guys. Well, you've been an excellent audience today. I really appreciate it. For you guys who stuck it out with us online, if there's anybody there, thank you very much. We'll see you later. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.